Hello, I am Scott Wiedenhoft, and I'm going to be giving information to shareholders like you over Ferrari. I chose Ferrari because as a kid, I grew up watching lots of TV, playing a lot of video games, and Ferrari was one of those brands that just stood out to me. It wasn't just the older stuff, but when I was in high school, Ferrari developed this beauty right here, the 360 Spider, which to this day is probably the most beautiful vehicle I've ever seen. Quick history on Ferrari. Enzo Ferrari is the founder of Ferrari. He used to be a driver and crew chief for Alfa Romeo. He got permission to do a separate racing team under Alfa Romeo known as Scuderia Ferrari. But then World War II happened. Racing came to a stop. Well, the world was at war. But back in 1947, Enzo Ferrari was able to create his own company, build his own cars, his own engines to directly compete with his former employer, Alfa Romeo. And in the first year, he was able to actually defeat them out on the race circuits. Ferrari is known for their great track reputation, huge race car company, and they're using the sales of their production vehicles to fund the racing. Unfortunately, they weren't producing enough vehicles to keep enough money that Ferrari wanted in his racing team. So he started looking for other means to supplement and ended up selling to Fiat in 1969. The caveat with Fiat, though, the reason I went with Fiat is because Enzo wanted to maintain control of the Ferrari racing team. And Fiat saw this as an opportunity to let him spend the money on the racing team, but they would be getting the money from the sales of the vehicles to the public. It lasted for almost 50 years. Just shy in 2016, Fiat, who now is FCA Group or the Fiat Chrysler Automotive Group, took the public freely traded securities from 10% to 66%, and then also gave 10% controlling interest to Enzo Ferrari's son because Enzo Ferrari had passed away, and making them an independent company for the first time in half a century. Strength of Ferrari, first and foremost, being a company that spends so much time on racing, they are the most successful manufacturer in Formula One. As of the conclusion of last year's season, 2023, they have 16 constructors titles and 15 drivers titles. Basically manufacturer. So depending on how well all of your drivers do, you get so many points, and whoever has the most points. So it's not about just having one good driver, it's about having a competitive field of your cars in with everybody else. And that gives them name brand strength. Throughout the racing community around the world, they are known for their high speed performance and luxury. They also have really good value retention. A report put out last year of the top 23 highest paid for vehicles at public auction. 12 of the top 23 were Ferrari, 10 of the top 13, and 4 of the top 5, with the highest Ferrari going for $51.7 million. They also have the strength of generating a lot of additional revenue through licensing, merchandising, royalties, sales of engines to other auto manufacturers, and renting engines to other Formula One teams. So if it's a Formula One team that can build the chassis and body, they just can't produce the power plant, they can go to Ferrari and rent an engine for their team for the season. All of these additions came up to be 14.3% of Ferrari's total revenue last year, which for an auto manufacturer to have 14% of your total revenue come from outside of the sales of your cars and parts is a really good thing for a company. Another strength is really good dividends. They paid $329 million in dividends. That's something that you need to be paying attention to as a shareholder, because that's money coming right back to you. And they also spent $461 million in stock repurchasing. A couple of years ago, they came together and decided that to strengthen themselves and the bond with the shareholders, that they were going to go back and buy some of those shares, limiting how many shares were out there and strengthening the value per share to somebody like you or I who are potential shareholders for Ferrari. They also increased their dividend payout ratio from 30 to 35% of their adjusted net profit sharing. These are just some of the cars with the licensing that they use and some of the royalty monies that they get. This is from TV and movies. Video games, these are just video games that they're on the covers of. This is not even including games like Gran Turismo or Forza, where they are actually drivable vehicles. And Ferrari has also opened up their own amusement park and museum in Abu Dhabi, located in the UAE, which is the wealthiest country in the world, with the fastest roller coaster, this beautiful building you can walk on top of, get a nice view of the skyline. They have a really neat thing called face pass recognition, where you download the app and put your face in, and you can use that and it will retain ticket information or payment methods. So as you're walking around doing stuff, you don't have to pull tickets out or prove anything. You just have to look at the camera and it knows that you have paid for or are going to pay for whatever you have set up for them. Weaknesses of Ferrari. Fortunately, weaknesses of Ferrari primarily come from their exclusivity, because they are such a high value vehicle. They don't have a lot of sales. They don't have a lot of manufacturing. They only have one manufacturing plant. It's Maranello, Italy. And only 5% of all of their sales are domestic, which means that 94% of everything that they make is getting tariffed as it goes to another country for sale. Another issue they have is non-automated processes. They don't use automated processes for any part of the Ferrari except for the installation of the valve mechanics. With that, it takes longer for the vehicles to be made, and you can't put out the numbers in a hand-only one manufacturing plant. You look at the numbers for last year, Ferrari put out 13,663 vehicles, as opposed to General Motors putting out 2.6 million cars. And because it is so low, but they do have the reputation, the demand far exceeds the supply, so they're selling their vehicles for $200,000 more than the US average of $44,000. But they do have lots of opportunity to get more bits of market value. One of them is continuing to grow their outside of cars and parts. So that 14% is a good number, but they can continue to grow that with lifestyle branding, more licensing, merchandising, royalties, get themselves in more video games, more movies, maybe come up with a deal with Time Warner or somebody to get some more cars in some of their movies. Another idea for them is to open an additional manufacturing plant. Ideally, they would want to do something like the United States, because the United States accounts for more than a quarter of all of their sales. In fact, the United States is higher than the next two countries combined in percentage of sales. The other thing that they can do is try to create a more cost competitive vehicle in that $70,000 to $90,000 range, because $250,000 for a vehicle, not a lot of people can afford that. More people are willing to go for the 70 to 90, and a lot of the higher end performance vehicles sold around the world are in that range, maybe around the 100, 120 range as well. Threats to Ferrari. like any auto manufacturer, threats are always going to come from other auto manufacturers. Um, Specifically, you've got Lamborghini, Bugatti, Koenigsegg, McLaren, Venom, um, all working at trying to build the most powerful, fastest supercar. Ferrari held the title of the fastest vehicle for a few years back in the 60s and 70s, but the emergence of a lot of these vehicles pushing the 300 plus mile an hour limits is just beyond what Ferrari is right now. You've also got Ford and Chevrolet, two American companies that Ford has a rivalry going back to the 60s with Ferrari, and Chevrolet just redesigned the Corvette, put a mid-mount engine in it, was able to get the aerodynamics cut down, looking crisper, cleaner, faster, and can do 0 to 60 in 2.6 seconds, whereas the Ferrari 812 can do it in 2.9 seconds. The MSRP of a Z06 Corvette is starting at 70,000, whereas the 812 Ferrari starting at over 400,000. Ferrari's also got threats in the racing world. Red Bull Racing has come onto the scene and dominated over the last few years. Ferrari hasn't won a title since 2007, and Red Bull has won it the last 4 consecutive years. Another threat is power generation. That's something that's an industry-wide thing. Ferrari builds their powerful engines, but they're internal combustion engines. There's been a lot of focus on the environmental implications of internal combustion engines and looking towards using battery power or some other source of green fuel. And then being such a high-priced vehicle, they're really dependent on the global economy. So pandemics, weak economies, stuff like that, people aren't going to be buying high $250,000 plus $500,000, $1 million cars if the money's just not there for them. Future Ferrari, though, operationally, as I mentioned before, getting that second assembly plant. Again, United States is the prime location for it, or, you know, maybe even Canada or Mexico, where you can look at the North American Free Trade Agreement. So, you know, maybe they might be able to do that so they don't have to worry about the labor unions. And make a cheaper vehicle. It don't have to be a super cheap, not beholden of the Ferrari name, but something, maybe a subsidiary they could invest into to just get them into that market, open up the market for them in that sub $100,000 range. Financially, continue supplementing the revenue. Licensing, merchandising, they've got the name, they can sell the products. Stock buyback program and profit sharing 30 to 35% increase. That's something that you or I, as a potential shareholder, is what we want. And our loyalty to the company, being rewarded by the company, is going to keep us happy with them and them happy with us. Thank you.